Hi, everyone. Oh, that's kind of cool. Actually, let's do that again. I want to hear that. Hi, everyone. That was kind of cool. We're going to talk about sync. How many people actually just came from Ruben Krippner's talk way on the other end of the building? And your Fitbit thanks you for doing that. Okay, cool. So we've got a lot of folks then. And how many people were at Seth's session yesterday on the future of SharePoint? Okay, good. So a lot of this stuff will seem familiar. We'll talk a little bit about some of those things and go a little bit more in depth. In case you're not in the right room, I'm going to talk about sync for OneDrive for Business. If you're here for the persistent advanced threats and so on and so forth, that was 2 hours ago. But feel free to stay. I like it. And if you're sitting in the back, there's a lot of room up front, and it's easier for me to see you and know kind of how you're reacting and feeling. And I don't have an arm, but I do have T-shirts. So my range is going to be limited to this kind of space here. So feel free to move forward. If you want one of the kick-ass OneDrive T-shirts, who's moving? All right, I got someone already moving forward. Here, you ready? How's the odds on me actually reaching that? I'm going to go for it, and I'm going to try not to hit you in the face or be 2 meters short. Here we go. Oh, to the right. Oh! I got more T-shirts. We'll do more of that throughout it. That's good. You're ready. That's good. The one last thing I say before we dive in is I think like 4 layers of my management chain are here. So if you guys could really act like you're loving it, I would appreciate that. All right. That's good. That's good. Okay. All right. My name is Jason Moore. I'm the Group Program Manager for OneDrive Sync. So I'm responsible for the OneDrive Sync clients. This is the part where you can boo. My team and I took over the OneDrive for Business Sync client in the last year, and I think we're going to talk about a bunch of things you guys are interested in with that. So I've got an agenda slide. I'm not going to make you read it. The agenda is really simple. First, we're going to say, hey, I'm sorry. We'll do that. Then I'm going to explain to you how I'm fixing it. And my hope is you'll believe me. We'll go through why and what you should think. And then we'll talk about some of the features coming and timelines around that. And hopefully all of those will meet your expectations and needs, although I know Ruben has been going around pre-selling them before my talk, but I'll actually show you at least one of them in action in the demo. So let's start with I'm sorry. Okay, we'll do show of hands on these. Have you ever seen the little blue cloud that goes forever and ever and ever and ever? Yes, it's infinite in its vastness. Or perhaps this thing where there's that one file that's still syncing. You'd be surprised, but we can actually take 10 days to sync a 10K file. Another good one is, hey, this is my favorite one of all the dialogue. So everyone's seen this one, right? This is the repair one. This is the one where we present the dialogue to you that says, hey, the action you can do is repair. Now, we could have done it for you because there's just one button there. There's no other choice. But that wouldn't be fun. I'm sorry. We couldn't sync the library because it was too big. There was the sync problems. Actually, a show of hands, this one will be really interesting. Who's ever seen the sync problems and then has solved it, has actually gotten out of it? Okay, 1, 2, maybe 10, 20. Okay, the room is like 600 people, so we can do the math. And again, another one of these repair dialogues where we say, yes, repair it or don't let your stuff work. Just one of those wonderful choices we wanted to bring you. So I'm sorry. We're gonna move past a bunch of this, but I'm going to explain to you a little bit about what we're doing and why. So we're delivering a next-generation OneDrive for Business Sync client. Our goal is to take all of that pain that we've all been through, that experience we've had, and actually deliver something that works incredibly well, incredibly robustly, and delivers the core features you've asked us for. We're committed to delivering this year. I should say this year. We're committed to delivering that this year. We think that we've got to get that out. We've got to prove to you that we care. We've got to show you that we're going to do the right thing. We're going to make it work incredibly well, and you're going to be very happy with it. And your customers are going to be very happy with it. Your users are going to be very happy with it. And we're going to talk about how today. So there's going to be a lot of me telling you incredibly exciting things like how do we make sure a sync engine works? But I promise there won't be too much math, and there will be no quiz at the end. So how are we doing this? First, we're going to build a single sync engine for OneDrive. We can just hear a shout out. How many OneDrive sync engines do you believe we have today? 2. 7, 5. Too many. That's the right answer. All right. I'm going to use that one. We'll just pretend it's mine. Okay, that joke. Thank you. So yeah, we have too many. We have different sync engines on personal versus business. Even in personal, we make different sync engines across what we've done on the Mac in the past and what we've done for Mac ODB Preview if you're using that sync client. 8.1, we took a bit of a detour and we did changes to our sync engine in different ways. And we've kind of come to this place where we've got a lot of sync engines. That's good, I guess. But we're not applying ourselves to all of those in the same consistent way and learning across all of them. So we're going to build a single sync engine, and we're going to make sure that that's absolutely as great as we can make it. We're going to do that based on the consumer code base. Actually, how many people here are OneDrive consumer user, like OneDrive Personal? Oh my gosh, that's a lot of people. Awesome. How do you like it? Yeah. Okay. Is it better or worse? Better? Okay, you guys are well trained. You heard them, right? Okay. So, yeah, right. So we're going to base that off our consumer code base. I'll explain a little bit more about that, but we want to have a single sync engine we're putting all that energy into that delivers those capabilities. And if you've used our consumer sync engine, you've probably noticed we make updates to it in a much more rapid pace. We've been adding more features and more capabilities to that, and we think that should come to business. We should give our best stuff to anyone who wants to pay us. We would love to do that. That's the right thing to do. And we're going to ship it this year. So I've said that. We've talked about it a bunch. I'll continue to make that commitment throughout the talk. Maybe I should start with a demo. So normally you do these talks and you babble and you say you promise a bunch of things and then you do the demo. I'm going to do the demo first. And it's just going to show some simple stuff. I'm actually going to show it running. This is how I'm syncing my own personal OneDrive for Business today at work. But it'll also give us a little bit of context on some of the conversation going forward. So that's my 7-year-old. His name is Henry. He'll be excited to find out. Can one of you guys take a picture so he knows that he was giant on screen? That's the kind of thing he'd like. So here I am. I'm running Windows 10. Actually, I'm assuming everyone's running Windows 10. You guys are trying out Windows 10? Maybe the build version? Show of hands. Who's been playing with Windows 10? Oh, wow, that's good. That's a good amount. So everything I'm showing you today works on Windows 7. Actually works on Vista. We're making sure that we go and get that wide base and we can have everyone get upgraded to the right place. But I want to show it on Windows 10 because I love using Windows 10. I'm doing it on my Surface. It's fun. It's cool. And I'm going to show you a couple of things. First, I'll actually show you that I've got a real OneDrive for Business set up in the infamous business Contoso. We'll see all this load. Okay, great. So you can see this is my content up on my OneDrive. This is demo content I threw together. I didn't want to show you all my secret ideas, my plots for world domination. But it gives you an idea. It's got the folders. It's got a bunch of files. It's a couple gigs worth of content up there. We could browse through it. But just remember that. We'll leave it in the background for a little second. Down here in the sys tray, you'll see I've got a little happy cloud. And you'll notice that it doesn't just say OneDrive, like the OneDrive Personal Sync client does. It says OneDrive Contoso. It knows about a tenancy. That's my Azure Active Directory account that's been connected up to the cloud, and it's actually syncing from there. And it looks just like the Personal Sync client there. I can right-click on it and get all the same features and capabilities out of that. But we'll just double-click and open the folder. And so here, I like to switch this into a bigger view mode. I love Details View, but for the demo. So here, there's a lot of happy little green checkboxes. And happy little green checkboxes are good. It means that all my stuff is in sync, and I have it on my machine. But you might have noticed that actually when I switched out of Details View here, I don't have all of the same content that's in my OneDrive for Business account. So I've actually already been able to choose not to sync all of that stuff. I've been able to use selective sync. And I'll show you how. Oh, wow, great. So we should keep that feature. I was going to turn it off, but just that one moment. Actually, that's the rule. If you don't applaud for everything, dead. We'll throw it away. I'm kidding. So I wanted to show a little bit on this, and actually I'm going to go sync and unsync some stuff. So I can right-click anywhere here and just choose OneDrive folders to sync. And it brings up the selective sync dialog. Again, if you've used our personal account, this is our personal system, this is pretty familiar. It shows you that stuff. This is actually the new version of that dialog, which shows you things like how much space every folder takes and how much disk space you have. And that just started rolling out last week. And in this case, I don't, breathing into that. I don't really need my personal stuff, so I'm just going to uncheck that. I could go through here, maybe uncheck some of this stuff. You'll notice that I'm selecting just some subfolders and not all of them, and I could go through all sorts of different variations of that. But I can see I'm going to have plenty of disk space with this. I'm just going to hit OK, and we'll look at it. Oh, it's actually already gone. And what's happened here is, as soon as I went and made that selective sync state, the sync client goes and confirms that stuff's in the cloud. It can remove it from the client, and boom, we're not taking that space up. Selective sync worked. I can do it in the opposite direction. So I can go in, let's actually go and say selective sync. It's pulling it back. You'll see there's a little blue icon on it, and oh, the files are already pulled down. Selective sync works. Yay! It's brought those files. So that's a pity clap. Don't do that. That's... all right, so I'm going to drag a file in just to show one more little bit of this. It actually really is real. It really does work. We really do use it. I've got this Word doc I created here. It's one of my favorite poems by Holmes. It's the Chambered Nautilus. We'll do the poetry section later. I'm going to drag it in, and you should see immediately it's picked up for syncing. We're not waiting 15 minutes for the sync engine to know that there's a file there that needs to be synced. I'm adequately creating time for it to actually sync. And if I go to the website, now that it's a little green thing, we should go down. Which folder did we put that in? We put that in personal. I should be able to browse into personal. It should be, and yes, it's there. All right. So we were able to actually go and make that work. This is the existing personal sync client working against OneDrive for Business. It is using Azure Active Directory credentials. It is aware of the tenant and applying the same rules and policies around that. And it runs on the same device, plugged in the same ways to Explorer and all the other capabilities that you know and may use today with our personal sync client. So that's my quick little demo on that running. Let's head back to the deck. Switching over. All right, so that's cool. That's a demo. That's great. Stage demos can be staged. They're demos. I think the first kind of question anyone should ask when they're saying, Jason, why are you telling me about this new sync client? Why should I believe you that you're going to do a better job than you've done in the past? So let's talk about that. Let's talk about what it means to get to reliable sync. I thought I'd take a step back and just give you guys a little notion of how we think about how reliable sync should work and how the next generation sync client that we're building actually works. So we talked a little bit about this. We're building on the OneDrive personal client. We think that's the right choice for this. And the reason we think that's the right choice is because there are millions of people doing it with billions of files. Billions and billions and billions of files. Millions and millions and millions of active clients right now, every single day, syncing all of those files. And they do a pretty good job. We could do better, but they do a pretty good job with that. And so we've seen kind of the torture test around the world of enormous amounts of differences in configurations and capabilities, networks, devices, how they're set up, et cetera. And we have a base that tells us we know how to do that part. So good. So that's the first part that gives us some confidence in what we're building there. The second is that we've actually gone and taken our sync protocol and moved it over to OneDrive for Business. So I'll show a little diagram in a second. It's not anything you wouldn't be able to draw after the 10-second explanation I'll give. But today, when you talk about sync, it's not really just a client thing that runs. The client is doing one part. It's the point A. It's got a file. It's trying to get it to point B. But point B does its part. The service has its own part to do. And it turns out that how the client and the service interact and how you think about them has a lot of impact in what you're building and how it actually talks to each other. And in this case, with the OneDrive sync protocol, we wanted to bring those together. We wanted to be able to know we had a comparable thing to talk about with sync. And I'll show, again, that diagram in a second. The other piece that we think is absolutely critical for doing this is a model for correctness. And I'll go through another slide on correctness. But the high-level idea is, how do you have a simple way, a simple methodology to prove that your sync client is better than your last one? To measure changes that you do to it and to measure how it works over time. We think correctness is actually a critical aspect of that, and I'll talk about that, like I said, in a second. So how does it work? So this is the sync protocol piece. So here's a really simple diagram for the cloud. I always tell the server guys, this is basically how it works. You cloud, then I talk to the OneDrive sync protocol. And it turns out that this is where you get the kind of common semantics and common syntax for how to talk about a file. Anyone who's tried to build a file sync engine or kind of move files around knows that these things are asymmetric. File systems and servers don't always support the same capabilities. Probably the simplest one is between Mac and PC, there are different file characters that are legal in a file name. And if you've ever tried to move files back and forth, there's all these weird things you have to do to make that work for those special file names. And the same is true for sync all up. So we have this OneDrive consumer service, we have this OneDrive sync protocol, and we have the sync client. We have this bluer cloud, that's the OneDrive for Business cloud, because blue is more businessy. That's the design for it. Don't do the piggy laugh, you've got to really feel it. The OneDrive sync protocol is then on top of that. And what this means is that we actually end up with a consistent syntax. We talk about how to change files in the same way across both services. So we're comparing apples to apples on how to talk about it. But it's also consistent semantics. So when you think about what it means for a file to change, there are all sorts of inherent things. Like if you move a folder, and there's a bunch of files under that folder, and at the same time, or very close to the same time, you've renamed that folder, or renamed a file underneath it, or deleted one, or added one, you want the behavior of that to consistently apply everywhere. You want to know that that's going to work in the same way. So using the sync protocol this way and using the client together allows us to make sure we know how it will work every single time. And then common telemetry, and this is a big theme for us, is that we want to be able to measure these things and go drive them. My goal is that every time we do an update to the sync client, it's always better, provably better. And we want to be able to know that when we actually deliver that, we saw all the different numbers and they all went up. They all looked better for that. And by having this, we can actually compare and contrast. It lets us client guys push the sync, on the sync side, push the server teams and say, you guys got to work harder. Those guys did this over here for us. So that allows us to give some more common telemetry and have a view to the entire product and how it works. So moving on to sync correctness. I mentioned sync correctness, and I think it's kind of worth taking a step back to talk about how you measure something working well. Anyone who's built a service or runs a bunch of services probably talks in terms of quality of service. You think 3 nines and 4 nines and 5 nines and just more nines are better. And that actually works really, really well for services. They're transactional systems. They're generally pretty stateless. And you can talk about those things. You can talk about a retry happening enough times that finally something went through. But it doesn't really work well for sync, because it turns out that users see things get wrong on the disk, and that doesn't matter if one day you're going to get it right. You can't have that be the model. So we think about terms of being correct as a thing that's really important for proving out what happens with sync. And I'll explain it to you all, and you will now all be experts in our super cool way of thinking about correctness. We do basically 4 steps, maybe 5. We first ask the server, and we say, are you in sync? And the server says, yeah, I'm in sync. I got all the files. I know what I'm doing. And we say, great, what does that mean to you? Why did you write that down? Let's see the list of files and where the state they're at. And then we go and ask the client. We say, hey, client, are you in sync? And the client goes, of course, man. I got all the files. It's good. And we say, okay, well, why don't you write it down as well? And then we compare them. And if those two things are actually both in sync, it'll be the same thing. It's really easy, right? And it should be really easy. But if they're not, we know they're incorrect. We know that they were both believed that they got to some state that's good, but it's actually truly unhealthy. And we can take a number of steps from there. We can figure out why. What caused you to think you were in sync but not be in sync? What are the things that didn't work? We can also go back and say, well, what could we do to heal it? And actually rolling out right now with the next version of our personal sync client, we're rolling out the first version of our auto heal technology. Happens under the covers, you never hear about it, you'll never see it, and that's the idea. It recognizes these states and can be triggered in a bunch of conditions to auto-heal the system, to say, this is a common state where these things get out of sync and this thing thinks it's right, and lets us auto-heal. And we'll bring all of that forward with the OneDrive for Business sync client. When we talk about correctness, it's probably worth breaking it down into specific categories. The reason I mentioned the quality of service numbers is that we used to talk that way ourselves. We'd say, yeah, it's 3 nines, it's really good. Maybe you get 3 nines and a half. We'll get to 4 nines one day. But actually, once we started thinking about correctness, we started talking in a very different way. It's really 1 in however many devices or however many files is incorrect. And those are the 2 major ones we look at. There's a whole bunch of other ones. But they really break down in a simple way. If you can say 1 and say, this would be bad, but 1 in 100 devices are incorrect, well, then you know that for that user and for that situation, it doesn't matter how many files are wrong. The device is incorrect. It's a bad state. You don't want that, and you need to move out of it. And then on the file side, you can actually look over a corpus of data. Because it might be that you have users with 50,000 files they're syncing, because we're not going to limit to 20,000. And you might have people, I'm just going to go back to the well. You might have people who only have a few files. And so you're going to have differences in terms of how they interact with it and how they see it. And both those measures give us a very healthy view across what does it mean to be correct. Now, there's a whole bunch more I'm not going to go into. I was going to bring a bunch of charts and walk you through the highlights of words like stalls and divergence, but they're all about conditions that run you into spaces where you're not able to be in a correct state. So the correctness really sums all of that up. But we can go and see things like, for some reason a client is always struggling to read a file, or the client is never able to connect to the service, or it's never able to complete moving up a file. All of those are different cases that we watch and different metrics that we include for it. But overall, we try to look at sync correctness as a way to really have that simple line that anyone can understand about how the product got better, or if it didn't in some development version, why it got worse. And we can go drive those features and fixes. And I guess the last thing I'll mention here is really that we've been doing this now for over 6-7 months on the OneDrive consumer client. And it has been incredibly educational for us, and it's one of the things that led us to bet on that as our code base. Because we've been able to immediately see when devices and file sets aren't in sync, and then categorize them, to bucketize them and say, oh, wow, a lot of files of, XYZ file extensions seem to have a problem. Why is that? Or ACL issues. For some reason, there's some program that's setting the ACLs on files and causing it so that we can't read them and sync them. Those are two kind of common ones that we've seen. And we've been able to go fix those and roll out the updates and drive up measurably, reliably, consistently, no heuristics, no interpretation, much, much better sync reliability. So that's kind of the summation of the big top-level things that we're doing around proving to ourselves that this is the right invention, right innovation, and the right way to carry forward on OneDrive for Business Sync. I'll recap them. We're betting on a single sync engine. We're putting all of our engineers, all of our efforts, all of our focus on moving that forward. We're betting on the consumer sync client and experience and the protocol around that because we believe we've proven something out at scale there that we know will work really well and be durable across all those investments. And we've invested in and built out an entire system around how we actually measure it and prove to ourselves and hold ourselves accountable so that every single update and every single change we make truly meets that bar. So that's sync correctness. That's kind of how we get comfortable on that. The other thing I want to talk about were some key sync features. So it's great and all to have a nice system that actually moves the file from point A to point B every time. We should do that. That seems obvious. Again, I'm sorry that maybe we haven't always. But we actually know that there's a set of features, set of functionality that just hasn't been there that absolutely needs to exist to make OneDrive for Business incredibly great. And I'm going to walk through a couple of those. Some of these you've already heard. I'll pretend that we didn't talk about them and they're all woo and ah. But some of them you might not have, and we'll talk a little bit about what they look like. So first up is the no more 20,000 file limit. This is a limitation today. Go ahead. My career thanks you. No, this is a limitation we have today around the client. It's not actually a service limitation. And it's silly. We shouldn't have it. So we're going to get rid of that. We're going to make sure that you can have the right set of files for a user in OneDrive for Business, regardless of what that count looks like. The other one that we're going to do is we'll have 10 gigabyte files. This is actually something we've talked about a lot. Today, people are limited to 2 gigabyte files on the OneDrive for Business service, and we're just going to blow the doors off that. We'll get to 10 gigabyte file support. We have it today with the personal service, so we know how to go build that. We know how to validate it, going back to we think we know how to get there in a really reliable way. The next set of things I'll talk about is what we call Disk Smart. So today, this is probably the biggest one that I've gotten questions about at the convention. We have this challenge where, for some reason, every time you sync, let's say, a 10 megabyte PowerPoint, we take 20 megabytes of disk space. Has anyone had that experience? Yeah. And you try to debug, you're like, why is it taking so much extra disk space? And well, it's not important why, but we're not going to do it anymore. In fact, it's actually, I say no more doubling here. We actually do way more than that sometimes, and it's quite painful and miserable. We're not going to do that. So when you have a 10 megabyte PowerPoint that you want to sync down to your device, we will use no more than 10 megs, maybe 10.1. That's a joke. We're going to use 10 megs. We'll just have a small set. We'll make sure that we're actually using the disk space appropriately, especially in an age where so many of our devices are getting smaller with less disk space, as well as larger with more disk space. The next is selective sync. It's what I demoed. You guys saw it in Ruben's talk, I'm assuming. I had to leave a little early. And we've been talking about this one for a while. This is the obvious one of you get to choose what goes on it. But what's not so obvious is the second scenario. The first scenario is simple. You just want to not bring everything down to this device. You may not have the disk space for it. The second scenario we actually find is even more powerful, and we're seeing increasingly. is people will actually have different devices for different needs or different scenarios that they're trying to achieve with a given device. So you might be working on Project Foo, but Project Bar, I mean, it's useful. You want to keep those files. You shouldn't have to keep them on your disk. You shouldn't have to pay the sync costs of bandwidth and disk space and power, constantly managing those things, and still be able to get to them. So the integration we have with Delve in OneDrive for Business and with Search in OneDrive for Business allows us to make sure that you can get to those files from the Office apps, from the website, and even from Cortana, but you don't have to have all those files locally on your disk. We think that's an important one. And then the other one is install size reduction. Who's actually deploying OneDrive for Business on a non-Office 2013 device today? Does anyone do this? Yeah, okay, there's a couple. This is actually surprisingly common, either a device where you don't have Office, for a bunch of good reasons, not what it's used for, or on a device where you have Office 2007 and Office 2010. In that case, OneDrive for Business takes about 1.4, 1.5 gigabytes of disk space. That's a lot. And we think we can do better. We can do better. And so with the new OneDrive Sync engine, it'll be in the tens of megabytes at most. And we think that'll also help with the impact we have on your disk. So kind of all up, we want to make sure that we're giving you back all the space you have, and really just using sparingly the space that we need to be able to bring the files down that you want. The last thing I'll talk about is on features coming is really being in control. And I'll start with blocking personal sync. So I've talked a lot about this cool OneDrive personal thing. We're really proud of it. We think it's great. A lot of you use it. I'm really excited about that. We're going to leverage that technology. We're going to have a single client that lets you sign in with your Microsoft accounts, sign in with your Azure Active Directory accounts. And all of you must have probably thought at some point, can I turn that off? And of course you can. We have to be able to do that. You have to be able to be in control of those devices and be able to know what people are doing with the devices you issue them. The other side of it is a feature that we've been long asked for that we'll be delivering with the current existing client and we'll add to the new client going forward, which is blocking unmanaged sync. And this is the ability to go and say, hey, on devices I don't control, don't let my users go and pull down all their data, because the policies and requirements I have around it might not be there. Awesome. And you can kind of see these are the yin and yang of it. On the devices I control, I can say, no, I'm sorry, you can't do your personal photos from the weekend. This is not the place to edit them before they go to Instagram. And then on the devices at home or their other personal devices, you can say, if I'm not capable of managing that environment, please don't go do stuff in work. Content there. The last one is migrating existing users. So I'm sure all of you kind of thought like, hey, great, I've already got this client. It's already doing a lot of syncing, and now you're going to make me take a new thing. So we've actually been spending a lot of time on that. We're going to make the automation of the install process as seamless as possible. We will go make sure that when you download this, when you get upgraded, when you have the new sync client, it will take over from the existing sync client. It'll move files as appropriately. It'll clean up the cache, and it'll make it a seamless experience. You won't have to go and touch each box. You won't have to uninstall things, re-download everything, and everyone's kind of had that Monday morning where everything seems to hit the network. We want to avoid that ever happening. And so you'll see that we'll provide as part of this a migration path that makes it very seamless to move forward to the new sync client. All right. There's two more things I really wanted to talk about in terms of future releases. And I wanted to mention them because they come up in feedback all the time, and we think about them a lot. The first is the pound and percent in file names. Has anyone run into this issue, like on SharePoint and OneDrive for Business, where you can't, so a fair amount. So we don't support those in file names today. It's kind of a bummer. I happen to like pound and percent, or I guess hashtag and percent. And we need to be able to support that. We're working on that. It just won't come in the first version of this. It's something we think we have to do. We think it's got to be done both on client and service to do it right, and so it's going to take a little bit longer to deliver. The other one is supporting longer paths. If you've been in the Mac world, good. If you've been in the Mac world, you know that you can have much, much longer paths. If you've been in the Windows world in the last 5-10 years, you know you can have much longer paths. And yet we've had all this legacy around something called max path in Windows for a long time, where we just shorter paths that have been supported, and even shorter in OneDrive for Business. We're going to get rid of that limit, but it's going to take us a little bit longer than we're going to get to in V1. And it's going to require, again, more work across both the client and the service around it. The simple version of it is the string has got to get bigger. But the truth is it's going to have all the impact on performance and kind of how much size and space that takes up, and we need to be really thoughtful to do that right. And of course, there'll be a lot more. We expect to deliver a whole series of awesome features over time. But first, we're going to earn your trust back with a reliable sync client that meets those core capabilities you've been asking for a while. And we think that from there, we'll be able to go and add lots and lots of capabilities and lots of new interesting features that enable your users and enable you to do great things with OneDrive for Business. So that gives you kind of the context overall of the things that we're doing for this next generation sync client. I thought I'd talk about timelines, and most of these should be things you've already heard. So, when do I get it? We will have a TAP program at the end of September. This will be our beta program. You're all invited. Please show up. We would like that. The main question I always get here is, well, how do I know? Are you going to personally call me, Jason, and send me an email and, maybe on Twitter or something? The best way, actually, is to watch our blog at blog.onedrive.com. We'll put announcements there. We'll talk about it. There'll be some rollout that we do as part of doing that. And then for those of you who are working with a technical account manager today, continue to be in touch with them. We're going to work with them on making sure we get all the folks who want to be in. There won't be any real artificial limits here. We really do want to get everyone telling us what they think about it from actually using it. The RTM will be by the end of the year. This will be based on your feedback out of that project, out of finishing it, putting those final touches on it, but we are committed to getting that out by the end of the year. And it's going to be PC and Mac simultaneous. So in the past, I think we've done a poor job of servicing all of our brethren, not just the folks with Windows and PCs or the latest version of Windows, but all versions of Windows we possibly can, and on the Mac. And so for both the beta and the RTM version, day and date, you'll have them on PC and Mac at the same time. Cool. And then, of course, more frequent releases from there. Our focus is going to move from getting that base right to continuing to knock off those top things we've been asked about and the things you care about and the things you want to see and do. And in fact, I'll just implore you to all spend time on our user voice. If you haven't been to the OneDrive user voice or you haven't used user voice before, it's a great forum system that allows us to kind of triage and see your ideas. You can go post an idea or you can vote up an idea that you think is really worthy. You can go comment on it. And we actually take that feedback to heart. It's another kind of piece of telemetry we get into the system for helping us decide what to do, where to focus, and what energy to put into. So we're spending a lot of time on that, a lot of time listening through a variety of modes. And everything you do to tell us what you want will help us kind of tweak that. And with that, I think we're done with the main part of the talk, and we're ready for Q&A. I believe there are there's 8 or 9 microphones. Oh, yeah, T-shirts. That's. Oh, yeah. Someone get it. Oh, I'm impressed. I almost got it to the 5th row there. We'll keep those coming. All right. Do we have an order to the microphones in the back? We'll start right here.
Can you have different sync selections for different devices?
Okay, great question. So let me make sure I understood. You're saying, hey, I may have a plethora of devices, or a given user will. Do I have to choose the same set of things to sync on all of those devices? The answer is you absolutely get to choose per device. So we think of selective sync as a statement about the relationship between the service and that device and choosing what works there. Cool. All right, we'll go right here next.
Okay, so in the current sync tool, there was possibility to sync also with the SharePoint.
The sync tool will also sync with SharePoint.
Yeah, the current one.
That's good feedback.
Will it continue as well? Will it continue as well? There was another limit. There was a limit about 5,000 files. So will the same apply, for example, for any SharePoint site that I have?
So this is again, making sure I get it. Hey, SharePoint team sites, is what you're referring to, also have a limit. They have a limit of about 5,000 per document library. Will those be changing? They won't be changing right now. That's something we'll definitely look at. But I hear that loud and clear, and I've heard that today and yesterday as well from folks at the show.
For V1, do you expect the OneDrive client to still be part of the Office suite, and will it support multi-factor?
Multi-factor auth? Okay.
Yep.
So 2 questions in one. 1, will sync come as part of Office? And 2, will it support multi-factor auth? And the answers are yes and yes. So we'll deliver sync as part of the Office release. We deliver actually parts of it already today with Office 2013, and Office 2016 will come with OneDrive for Business Sync, the new sync client enabled with that. The code base for that will be on the time frame I talked about, as opposed to the Office 26 time frame, but it'll be part of those packages and be able to deploy. In terms of multi-factor auth, yes, we support multi-factor auth, and in fact, we support it today for the personal client if you've enabled it. Cool. Oh, let's go here again. And I'll go around, folks. We'll do here, and then I'm going to do voyage around the room.
How do you anticipate handling policy control around different file types, so restriction of sync of executables, etc.?
Oh, okay. So the question is, hey, how are we going to handle different file types and different policy controls around those? Because today, actually, we have a number of file types we don't support syncing in the service. There's kind of really two sets of file types, to answer your question, that we don't support. One set of things that are not legal in the Windows file system. So a fun thing is to go copy com at the command line in a Windows file system. There's a whole bunch of these file names that are files that are illegal to have. So those we just won't support because it causes all sorts of weirdness. But then there's file types like JavaScript files that we don't support today. And that's something we're taking a hard look. I don't have much to say yet exactly when and how, but definitely want to enable you to sync your documents wherever they are in the right way. Yeah. All right, we're going to go around the room to prepare people.
Yeah, I want to take your advice actually on something. So if the old sync client is not yet implemented, would you recommend that we wait until the new one is implemented and we package it, or we release this one? So
the question is, hey, Jason, that was great, your talk. And I was very excited about this new sync client. But should I wait? Should I wait for it, or should I implement today? And the answer is actually complicated. It really depends on what you're doing. It depends on the scope of how many files you're talking about. You know, if your users have a relatively small set of files and they're not syncing a ton of stuff, it actually works pretty well. We have a lot of customers that really do have it working today. But if you're looking at something where you're going to start hitting those limits and start running into those challenges, you might decide to wait and say, well, instead of having to create a bunch of workarounds, we're going to take some time and see how this goes, get on the TAP program, and then get on the beta at the end of the or get the final at the end of the year. That's kind of a complicated answer to your question, but I really do think it matters exactly how. And in fact, actually, I'll take that moment. So the OneDrive team will be on, has been and will continue to be on the show floor upstairs. And this is actually a great kind of conversation we've been having with a lot of customers. Exactly how should I choose to go deploy? And we like to talk about specifically what are you doing, what is your content, what is the right place for it, and how should you move forward?
Yeah, the question was just to avoid these kind of errors and problems that the user might have.
Yeah. So if you don't have heavy data sets, for example, so something over 20,000 files, or large files over 2 gigs, or an enormous amount of activity on it, those things would say, yeah, you should be able to move forward with a deployment. But if you think you're going to run into those things, then I would counsel you to wait for a while on that.
You're going to.
Right. Thanks.
Cool. That's all the way to the end there.
Okay, Jason, 2 questions, please. One, the first is IT control over what files can be synchronized, what file types, and also forcing certain folders like My Documents to always be synced so the user can't not do that.
Ooh, I like both of those.
And then the other one is any chance you'll do data deduplication across the tenants so the users, if 10 people get the same file, they don't all have to move it?
Okay, so two big questions. Actually, I think you did 3. I think you snuck in 3, but that's fine. That's fine. So let me make sure I get them right. So first question was, hey, can I control what kinds of files my tenants actually sync? Right, that was the first one. And I would say I'm not really sure what controls we have in the service, and I don't know the answer to that one, but I will find out the answer for you, and I will be on the show floor tomorrow, and I will have that answer for you. My name is Jason.
Hi.
What's your name?
Paul.
Paul. Okay, great. So we'll do that. I'll find out that one, and then anyone else that asks, we'll tell everybody. Number 2 was, hey, can I force them to redirect their My Documents and not allow them to reset it? Now, that's actually a question really about the host operating system. And in this case, because you said My Documents, I know you mean Windows. In a past life, I was the PM for that feature in Windows. So that's really a Windows feature and capability to lock that down. Those are settings that Windows provides, and Windows provides group policies around controlling those settings. And it's certainly possible with those to go and say, hey, I can redirect My Documents to this location, and you, user, are not allowed to change that.
Right, but I don't want them to be able to go into OneDrive and uncheck it.
Oh, to like unsync OneDrive?
Yeah.
Or to not do that?
Yeah.
That's a good question. That's actually a good feature ask. We should add that to the list and make sure we follow up on that one.
That's 4 now. So.
Yeah, that's 4. Yeah, that's okay. Look, you're amongst friends. It's good. Now, the last question was, hey, what are you doing around data deduplication on the service side? And I think the scenario you're getting to is, hey, if everybody uploads the same 10 gigabyte, let's call it personal video that starts with MGM Grand. No, I'm kidding. You've got some documents you're putting up that everyone's got the same, literally the same bits, right? The exact same copy. What are we doing to dedupe those in the back end?
No, I want you to be smart enough to not send it up 10 times for all the users.
To say, hey, you've already got that. You don't need to sync it again.
Yeah.
Right. That's actually a good thing. So we put that kind of in the category of optimization. So how do we go and make sure that the sync client is as smart as possible about what it does in terms of syncing up? That's not one we do today in the personal sync or OneDrive for Business sync. That is the kind of thing we have in the roadmap and would like to go do.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. All right, go to the back there.
Is there any plans for easy verbose logging on the client?
Easy verbose logging. Okay, so the question is, are there any plans for easy verbose logging in the client? We actually get pretty verbose logs in the client today, and we expose those. You could easily go get those in the personal sync client. We don't in the existing OneDrive for Business client. Whether or not it's easy is a really good question. We use a number of tools to go interpret that. I think that's actually would fall into the category of good feature request for us to do. Let me ask you a question. What is it you want to do with the logs?
I want to be able to accurately troubleshoot when it's not working correctly.
Well, there's usually one of 2 scenarios. The first one is exactly that, and we should go figure out how to make sure that works. But the second one actually is also interesting, which is you might actually want us to provide a way for you to get those for a tenant and say, are there consistent errors across all of my users for that kind of thing? And I think that's another interesting question for us to go look at. So we have the logs. We haven't done the work right now. It's not part of the kind of promise for the V1 capabilities to do that. But I think that's a really good idea, and we should go invest in doing it. All right, we're going to go around the back of the room, and then we'll come back around. So yes.
Okay, so we have all of our users on Office 365, and
Cool.
One of the problems that we're running into with the OneDrive for Business Sync is when a login changes for a user, for a name change or whatever reason, then we have to completely resync their OneDrive for Business client. So because the URL changes, right? So is there going to be anything to address that? Number one, and then number 2, like in the Microsoft File Transfer Manager, there's a way to set throttling on how much came over the pipe in different areas.
Yeah.
Is there going to be anything enabled to be able to kind of throttle based upon a client and the connectivity bandwidth needs that they're running into?
Right. Okay, so 2 questions. Hopefully I'm proving excellent memory. So the first question was, hey, what are you going to do to make sure that this experience of changing someone's account identity doesn't cause me to go through this full flush and throwing away all the data and having to resync everything, because that's pretty painful and miserable, and I'm sorry. I don't know exactly what we handle for that case, but we'll go find out, and that's something we should just make work right. The truth is, of course, you shouldn't have to download everything just because an account has changed. We should figure out how we do that in a seamless way. With the URL changing and whatnot, we're still backed in the OneDrive for Business service. That's something that we're one big team. We can go work that out and go figure that out. So that's a good one. I'll take that as a request. File it on user voice. Vote it up, everyone, so we can go have that one. Number 2 was, hey, how are you going to kill my network and give me some control over that? That was accurate summation? Okay, good. I'm getting the nod. Right. So we actually have a couple capabilities today in the sync client, in the personal sync client, that kind of have us back off in terms of being very aggressive in syncing, and we'll have that in the next generation sync client on OneDrive for Business. But in terms of what you're really asking for is something that's going to be more globally controlled, some way to go and say, hey, how do I dial that for everybody? Because if you're telling me I got to go hit switches on every box, that doesn't seem like a really good scenario. That's something we have to put a lot of thought into. We know that's something that's a really useful capability, especially when you talk about kind of the high traffic points of day, and something that we should deliver. Cool. All right, I'm going to keep moving. Yes, in the back there.
Hi. So I have a multi-part question. I'll make it one long run-on sentence.
Sure.
To paint the picture, we have 3 different types of storage in our company. We have personal directories, department directories, and a general internal shared public directory, all of which reside on whether it be a Windows share or a CIFS volume on a SAN. The question is a lot of this seems to be focused more on the client installed on the desktop or the laptop itself. A lot of our users have 20, 30, 40, 50 gig files, folders. And is there an opportunity for us to sync those between a server and the CIF share up to OneDrive for Business, rather than having, let's say, for example, our marketing department has a 50 gig volume, syncing that same 50 gig volume between the 20 people that work in marketing? Can we set it up on the server instead of the client?
I think there really are 2 parts to the answer. So let me make sure I got it right. Hey, and nod your heads because I've heard this one a lot if you've heard this. We have a bunch of network shares and a bunch of network topologies we've created over the last eon, many different capabilities, and we've put people's files in those, and we've leveraged things like being able to mount a drive and redirect my documents to point to those network devices, and that made it easier for us to do things like backup and make sure that if someone's laptop somehow slipped off the boat and into the drink, you're able to restore all the data and you have access to it. And then, of course, in the case where you have people, 100 people accessing 50 gigs of marketing content, you didn't have a lot of content in that space. So very reasonable kind of question. And then, and I think that kind of goes into, and how does that work?
It's faster, too, given the fact that they're accessing it in
Sure.
the LAN as opposed to across the internet.
Right, of course. So there's kind of it's a 2-parter, I think, my answer. The first part is I say, actually, a lot of what you're talking about is really SharePoint team sites. Like SharePoint team sites are really designed around how do I get a bunch of content together and make it available to a lot of people? And how do I make sure that I can build that in interesting ways where there's other things I might actually connect to that data? So I think I would actually start with, sounds like we should think hard about how SharePoint Online, team sites actually solve some part or all part of that kind of commonly accessed content that's shared. And then, of course, we have the existing sync client for that. And then on the content that's not shared, which you didn't really get to, but I'll mention it anyway.
The personal directory.
Sure, the personal directory, exactly. In that case, you're kind of saying, hey, could the sync thing talk to the server share and not to the local device? And we actually think those things are like different ways of solving the same problem, and that sync isn't really the thing that we should have there. You really are saying, hey, I want a scenario where I don't have local content at all, and I always talk to a network, and I want to have a scenario which sync is really about, which is I want to put the content locally on this device. And the difference being things like taking them offline, how they're addressed, where they show up in the local system, et cetera. So we think sync is really a different solution to that particular case. And that in the file share case, we actually really need to think hard about, well, how do we enable that? What is it you need? Is that something like Windows provides the file branch cache managing service, et cetera? Is that the right way to go? That's something we'll have to think about more. But I think the other 2 cases are really sync is about where you want to pull content down to this device, and team sites are about when you want to share a broad set of content with a small to large group of people.
So the short answer is that the OneDrive client really does have to be on a client, not on the server.
Yes,
okay.
It's really optimized for that and focused on this.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hi, in the back there.
Question about Windows 10 experience now.
Yes.
So if you are running Windows 8 with OneDrive for private cloud, so you see your files which are not synchronized also. In Windows 10, you don't see them.
Yeah.
Will they come back? Because, if you are looking for a file, you have to open the browser to go
find it. Yes, no, absolutely. Yes. Very well aware of the scenario. So just to catch everyone up, in Windows 8.1, we had a technology that let us kind of browse, these little stub files for all of your files in the cloud without having the full file necessarily synced. There's some really interesting capabilities to that. And in Windows 10, we've actually moved back to our selective sync model, which we have on 7 and Mac OS and in other places. So to that technology or to that capability in 8.1, we think of it as 2 pieces. One piece is the set of scenarios you want to enable. And the set of scenarios you described are awesome, right? It's, hey, how do I go and find my stuff without having to sync it all? And there's a couple different ways for that. We love that. We're building capabilities like that now in Windows 10, and long term we'll continue to invest in that scenario and get back to making that awesome. Then there's a second question, which is the current technology we use in Windows 8.1 for that. It just doesn't meet our standards. It doesn't meet our standards because it's not as simple to explain to the average human being. Everyone in this room is incredibly smart. by virtue of doing complicated things with computers, and that doesn't necessarily represent the breadth of kind of humanity that we want to be able to use these things and make it brain dead simple. And we found selective sync really does map more generally to how people kind of think about their sets of content. And so that's kind of a challenge we had around the technology and what we did there. But going back to the scenarios, there's things like, hey, I want to be able to find my file. And with 8.1, you could just search and do that. Well, in Windows 10, you also can search or do that. And it actually knows how to go online and find things and bring down results from the OneDrive service or the OneDrive for Business service and display those with your local files. So we kind of solved that capability there. The one that's, I think, really uncovered in that current base is going to be the scenario where how do I just browse? How do you make it just really simple? I click and browse. Yes. We have more work to do there, but we definitely care about that scenario.
Okay. And the second question,
sure.
The new client won't support the SharePoint on-premise, right?
That's correct. Really, the client we're talking about today is the OneDrive for Business Sync client.
So what happens if I have team sites on-premise and I have OneDrive in the cloud?
You'll have both capabilities. So both sync engines will continue to work side by side.
Okay, so I can install these both in parallel?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep. All right, we'll continue moving around the back of the room.
Right. After that question was asked about SmartSync, I just have one question left, and it's about when will you have the capability to sync just the changed bytes of a file, not the whole file every time I have just like one bit changed.
Right. Okay, so the scenario or the question is, hey, when I go and change one small part of a file, why are you syncing all 100 gigabytes of it?
Right.
Could you do less, please? Great question. So we actually have this today with Personal Sync, and actually OneDrive for Business Sync always does this. They look at byte ranges, know how to pull it apart, and it's actually very smart about Office documents. It knows how to pull apart an Office document and sync only the changes for that. But we don't provide it across the board with the sync engine for all file types. And it's a great performance optimization that you can do, because it's less bytes on the wire, et cetera, and it's something that can make the overall experience just feel smoother. A classic example, if you've used Xbox Music, which you can now store your personal music in OneDrive and listen through the Xbox Music anywhere, and you change the album artist, we shouldn't have to resync all those files. So it's a good scenario, it's a good capability. We don't have it today. It's in my wish list on the performance side, and something that you'll actually, if you go to the user voice, you'll find that is a highly rated user voice item. So we're watching that, and that's actually a great way to watch how we kind of respond and think about it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, way in the back. Hello.
Hi, I had a quick question about, although I'm excited about selective sync and hopefully we'll be able to manage that by GPO in the future, I'm more concerned about today and the current version. We have a dense RDS population, and we are deploying Office 365, and we want to leverage that OneDrive for Business, but we want to disable sync so that the roaming profiles aren't
colliding.
Overgrow. Exactly. And so is that capability there to disable the sync in the current version?
Yes, you can disable sync. There's two things you can do. You can disable on the service side and actually say, hey, don't allow this library to be synced. OneDrive for Business and SharePoint both support that capability. And you can go and disable via GPO.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Cool. All right, on the edge here.
Hi, Jason.
Hi.
I have a dilemma where most of my end users, thousands of end users, embraced the consumer-based OneDrive. They've learned to love it.
I'm sorry.
They don't want to get rid of it. And now, congratulations, the entire company has the ability to use business OneDrive instead of the consumer-based OneDrive. They used it at home. They don't want to get rid of it. And guess what? They can't use business OneDrive and the consumer OneDrive on the same device. Any plans for that in the future?
So first of all, let me recap. It was good. It was well formulated, but my brain needs to work through it and come up with a great answer. First was, wow, OneDrive Personal is amazing. I heard that. It was great. Yes.
Yeah.
You're welcome. I'm kidding. No, but hey, you've got all these users using that, right? It kind of spread like wildfire.
At home.
Yeah. Tell me if anyone's had that happen with anything that maybe starts with a drop. Right? We've heard that one too, right?
I wasn't going to go that or the G word.
So they're using that and they're happy with that and they're doing that. And you're saying now you've given them OneDrive for Business, but for some reason you can't have them work both on the same machine.
Correct.
That's a bug. We should just go figure out what's going on with the machines and fix it.
Was it a bug or a feature?
It's a bug. You should be able to choose to have both of those things working on a given device.
Okay.
And then, of course, if you own that device, if you manage that device, you should be able to control whether they can. But they both definitely are designed to work together or work side by side, syncing each respective service. And so if that's not working today, that's really something we should go figure out and just understand why it is and fix it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
you. Thanks. All right, we'll come around here.
Are you able to protect against mass corruption from like ransomware without doing separate backups?
This is a great question. This is one of my favorites. So have you guys seen this happen? It's where like someone gets this software downloaded to their computer and then it just encrypts all the data. And then in this case, like in your OneDrive personal, OneDrive business, it uploads all those encrypted versions of the files. Yay! And it says, hey, they're really helpful. They're like, look, man, for like 1995, we could totally decrypt those files for you. That's a fascinating business to be in. So the question is, hey, what are you guys doing to stop that? How do you block that? In OneDrive for Business, we have the ability to go and roll back and go back to other versions, but we don't actually have a really simple way for you to do that today. It is a request we've heard about a lot to have the simple button or simple point in time rollback feature, and it's something we should do. But we don't actually have that exposed in any simple way. You could script it. You could go file by file, but that's quite painful. And that's the ransomware thing, I think, is something that's going to continue to be a problem, and we'll have to get after doing that. That's a really good one, or good one in the sense of fascinating problem we should go solve. All right, thank you. Next, up here.
So on the team sites, currently you can sync team site document libraries with the OneDrive for Business client.
Yeah.
I understand that that's not in the first release of the new sync client, but is it on the roadmap for?
So the question is, hey, Jason, what you said is new sync client for OneDrive for Business. It's going to be pretty good. We're going to like it. Old sync client, which also supports on-premises. It supports SharePoint team sites and syncing those things. That's going to continue to work. We're not going to break that functionality. We actually find that works much better and more reliably for folks, so that's really good. Hey, will you bring those things together? I think that's actually, is that what you want? You want me to bring those?
Yeah, I mean, we don't find it really reliable now, but the question is, will the new sync client support that scenario, or should we be looking at third parties for?
Definitely not something we'll have in V1. Definitely something we'll look at over time. I think it's a really good question. One of the interesting kind of things is how many people do that sync. Like, what are you seeing in terms of people actually engaging with it? But it's certainly a reasonable thing to say, hey, I want to be able to have that work in a single client.
Yeah. Yeah, in our case, it seems like the focus has been more in personal documents here with OneDrive for Business, and we're looking at not wanting that to be prevalent and sticking with team sites and project sites.
Interesting.
So, losing that scenario would have big implications. But
right. Well, we definitely want to take that feature away. Right. We'll keep that working. And the question is, to your point of like, hey, is that something that comes down to one client in the future? We have to do hard thinking on that, but I think it's fair feedback.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Cool. We're going to just keep going around the room until everyone is bored or they kick us out. How are we doing on time? We got time.
Jason, my question is, what about prioritized sync? You've got selective sync, but for someone moving a bunch of content, either new machine or they're just getting started and they've got all these grandiose plans of what they want to move in, they have no control over what gets done first. And so I'm interested in being able to set priorities on what's selected and saying, no matter what's got to be done, this folder always is synced first and foremost. Right.
That's so awesome. So the scenario is, hey, can I control the order of things being synced, the priority for those things? Actually, I'll ask a quick question. Did anyone ever have folder share? Do you guys remember folder share? Something, maybe, okay, a couple hands. So we bought folder share in 2006, and actually a bunch of that code eventually became the OneDrive Personal Sync client, and it had that capability. You could prioritize. You could choose a file that you wanted to sync, and you could reorder the way sync worked on that. We don't have that ability today in the sync clients, but I think that's actually a really common request. And you put a spin on it that I hadn't heard before, which was always prioritize this folder over other folders. Yep. And I think that's both interesting in a new deployment situation, get that user up and running as fast as possible, but probably also in hey, this is my work projects folder, and that's more interesting than the archive folder. Yeah, the archive folder, you eventually get it, but if you're going to sync right now, get this. Okay, that's actually a good one. We don't have that capability today, but it's something we'll definitely look at. Thanks. All right.
So I was actually thinking about his question with Outlook. When you download a new profile and you select a subfolder, it'll prioritize that. So maybe that could be something.
Yeah. Maybe that's the model for doing it.
Right. And it's intelligent enough to know where I'm at
Yeah.
But anyways, my question is map drives.
Map drives,
now,
yes.
I know the gentleman over there. Okay.
Go map drives.
I tested it. The problem is after time, the SAML token expires, and then that map drive is useless. So, any ideas?
Let me whip something up for you. No, so the question is, just to repeat it, make sure I'm getting it right, is, hey, we're using map drives as a way to get our users access to their content in OneDrive for Business or SharePoint.
Yep.
And we support, if you don't know, exposing from the OneDrive for Business and SharePoint service, DAV protocol heads, which allows that Windows Explorer and the Windows file system know how to read those things and talk to them. And you've got this interesting kind of conflagration of the way authentication works for the base SPO service, the DAV protocol and how it works, and the legacy code in Windows that lets you do that.
Right.
And it's not always the most robust and reliable thing for doing it. So my solution to it is probably not going to be the simple thing you'd like to hear. But it's a real challenge because it's the model so many of us have deployed in the years of kind of bringing storage to the masses and kind of helping everybody have a secure, reliable way to put their files. So in terms of making that work, there's probably some things we could go do for the specific case, build scripts that go and, re-auth and make those connections get reset up, but those aren't incredibly durable. And really the choice you have to make is kind of back on you of like, do you want to have sync be responsible for moving content between those two devices, or do you want direct access? And in the case of direct access, I think we have homework to go do around the best way to do that durably at scale. Because you'll soon run into things where if you continue going down the DAV path, like DAV's a chatty protocol. Is that really what you want to do over the internet to an Office 365 data center? It could be.
No, that's a good point.
Those kind of implications all come on board for it.
Okay. Yeah, we thought about extending the life of the SAML token, but then you get into security issues like, I got this token that expires in 1 year.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thank you.
I'm sure that couldn't possibly go wrong. So, yeah, no, fair enough. All right, way on the end there.
Oh, thank you. Hey, you may have... First, hi, Jason.
Hi. What's your name?
I'm Paul.
Hi, Paul.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm Jason.
Hey. So I think you may have covered bits and pieces of this scenario in what you've been saying, but I'll just lay out the scenario that affected me. And that is we rolled out OneDrive for Business across our organization. And some of our executives then used it as an offline method of grabbing files before they would get on an airplane to go somewhere. That was fine, but then they also gave their assistants permissions to use those directories, and we got in huge, weird sync situations, and so, hi.
So you basically had, so just to recap, so all these executives got, if my bosses are here, a couple of years, all these executives, right? So they got a bunch of stuff set up in OneDrive for Business, and then they said, well, doing stuff with my content is a little bit beyond me, so they gave someone else access to it.
Right, like preload my documents so I can read them on the plane.
Yeah, I don't see what could possibly go wrong. And have they heard of email? But okay, fine. So you've got that challenge, and you basically, just to make sure I get it right, this other person or this assistant or whatever is also using sync.
Yeah.
And they're set up to sync against those files.
Yep.
And then you run into weird conflicts because of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would start with don't do that, but okay.
That's what we were told.
Paul, you're my friend now. I want to solve this for you. I want to figure out how we make it work reliably. No, the truth is that part of what you're going to get hung up on is some of the challenges we actually have in the sync code base against OneDrive for Business. And so we've created challenges that are going to make it more likely you run into some of these issues. A bunch of that will get solved, obviously in time. But that is kind of a challenge when you go do that. We really do think of OneDrive for Business as your personal stuff. You might share out individual things and occasionally a folder for working with others and small teams and small groups. That totally makes sense, and it's something we're going to go invest in incredibly over the next couple of years. We think that's great. But OneDrive for Business is probably not the best setup for it. Almost like they should really just have a team site, maybe a team site even just with the exec and their admin or set of folks, and say, okay, that's a place to pull together content and we all pull from it. That may actually be the better short-term solution for you.
Still using sync, though, for that?
Yeah, you can still use sync for that.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
Cool. Thanks, Paul. Good luck. In the back.
Hi, Jason. We're just starting to get into Office 365 and OneDrive for Business in our organization.
Cool.
And we're kind of running into something, and I'm trying to find out maybe if you guys know if it's something you already know about, if it really is a problem, or if it's just something goofy going on for us. We've noticed users who had already set up Microsoft accounts previously use their corporate email address. Now that we have Office 365 and they go to set up their Microsoft account for that using their corporate email address, things go crazy and we can't get OneDrive to work all the time. Especially, we're seeing a lot of problems with their OneNote. It will not authenticate and we can't get to it. You remove the account, re-add it, it goes in, grabs a notebook, then as soon as you close OneNote, you can't get to the notebook again.
I'm sorry. I'm going to get a badge with that. So again, I'll try to feel the vibe on this one. So it's, hey, so we just started to use Office 365. Thank you. It's awesome. We're glad to have you on board. And it sounds like you have a history of people that used their work email address to create a Microsoft account and do all sorts of fun, cool, personal stuff with that. And maybe they're also now trying to use it for work purposes. And that creates all sorts of exciting collisions across our vast collection of awesome apps. You mentioned OneNote in particular, but I suspect you'd find that a number of different applications and endpoints will have conflicts and challenges around that. That's something that's probably best handled with the support team in Azure Active Directory and kind of their best recommendations on that. I'm not up to date on the latest there. Okay. That is a challenge that we've created in the past around how Microsoft accounts are kind of this thing you can sign up with any email address. We call easy ID or email as sign-in. And the Azure Active Directory, which is tied to a given domain where you have complete control over those things. And that kind of intersection creates challenges, certainly in our products that support both. OneNote is probably one of the best examples. OneNote's an awesome app, whether it's for personal or work, because of that. So in those cases, we probably have to work through specifics and support around how you control or reset those things, or exactly what causes that conflict. In some cases, it could be things like the order that you're signing into those services. It's triggering what order of code it's running to go and decide what to pull, open a notebook or not, which would explain some of the weirdness that you're seeing about, like, hey, it opens, great, close it, now it's gone. Those kinds of things tend to come out of that. I'm sorry about that one. That is a painful thing that we created as part of trying to do all the features.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, cool. Right over here. We're working our way across the back.
Hey, Jason, thanks. Quick question. Looking forward to the new sync agent, my question's hopefully very simple. When the new sync agent gets deployed and we start to hand off that responsibility for synchronization to the new agent, is there an assumption or a requirement that the current sync status is healthy?
No. So the question is, hey, do I have to make sure that the device is in a super great health state for sync and that sync is working perfectly in order to migrate it forward? No. The simple answer for that, because I wouldn't be solving your problem if I said first solve your problem and then it's great. Actually, maybe that was the way I should have done it. It would have been a lot easier. No, we don't require that. There are some interesting edge cases that we'll need to work through and either document and talk about because we want to make sure you never get into a case where you lose data. That's our nightmare, so we're kind of incredibly extreme on making sure you never get into that situation. But the idea is not to require you to say, okay, we'll do a full sync and everything should work before you can start.
Sure, thanks.
Cool. Right in the back there.
Hey, Jason. Two simple questions. First one, is GrooveX dead? And second one, is OneDrive for Business still a SharePoint document library with all the settings, custom columns, and I can use? Or is it going to be transformed in something like OneDrive or Dropbox or whatever?
So two questions.
Yeah.
The first is I think I heard you, is Groove dead?
Yeah.
That's an interesting question, but the short answer is no. And then the other one was, hey, is OneDrive for Business still built out of SharePoint? Yeah. And the answer for that is absolutely yes. But let me give a little bit more nuanced answers to both of them. So when we talk about OneDrive for Business Sync, or we talk about even Team Site Sync, we actually have kind of a couple of different pieces of code that handle that. Groove is probably something you've seen like in Task Manager, and you associated that with the OneDrive for Business Sync because that was the name we had for before. But actually, that's really only part of it. We have a number of other components that exist within Office. MSO Sync might be one, MSO Sync DLL, that actually handles the file sync part of those things. So we don't think those things are dead. They continue forward in a whole bunch of forms where they work reliably and well, and where they don't, we'll move forward with the next generation sync client. So that's the OneDrive for Business investment we're making. So I don't think there's a simple kind of like, yay, the king is dead, long live the king kind of thing. It really is kind of different branches in time that we're focusing them on. The second question was, hey, is OneDrive for Business still based out of SharePoint? Or I think you said Dropbox as one of your answers. No. Good shot. No, it's based out of SharePoint Online, and actually more critically, it's based out of the services that we have in Office 365. And the reason for that is that's what gives us the compliance that we have in our data centers. It gives us the tool sets. If you went to Ruben's talk earlier, he walked through the DLP capabilities, the e-discovery capabilities, records management, et cetera. Those are all built into the base core of SharePoint, that capability and technology. Actually, there's almost nothing today in Office 365 that doesn't take something from SharePoint in some way. So we think that's actually super valuable. It's a core part of the value proposition and what we actually deliver, and we think that's actually a really powerful capability to leverage. We want to continue to be able to take advantage of all those capabilities. Cool. Right there.
Okay. Hi, Jason, again. Hi. I have another question.
Are you back again with another question?
Yes.
All right, go ahead. Why not?
Okay, so actually, if I use the sync tool for OneDrive, I can sync my files and the files that I share with someone. Is there a plan to as well sync files that someone shares with me?
I'm so glad someone asked this question. So I'll repeat it just to make sure I got it right. So my elation and excitement is held. Hey, it's today with OneDrive Personal Sync. I can sync files that are my own and files that I've shared with others. But I can't sync today files that are shared with me. So something we actually announced buried in a blog post in January is we're going to be delivering this year the ability to sync shared folders in the OneDrive Personal Sync client. And so we will have that capability, and you'll be able to sync anything someone shares with you in OneDrive Personal. And we think long term, we're building that feature into the next generation sync client. I think you can see where that might go, but that's the kind of investment we're making around that because of exactly that scenario. And it's pretty cool, and I'm using it today. So it's something that we're pretty excited about doing.
Okay, so that's actually why I came back here.
Oh, well, thank you for coming back. That's my favorite so far.
Thank you.
Are we out of T-shirts? Tony, can you get a T-shirt back there? Well, don't move forward. It's going to make it hard. I want Tony to really... Oh, thank you. Thank you. All right, we'll keep going around.
Hi, we have a few thousand users on VDIs, and that's on shared infrastructure.
Yeah.
Their personal files are still on the NAS, and so we actually had a company that split off from us, and we went through this process of migrating their content out to Office 365. And the result was that shared infrastructure required a lot more storage, and it was, cost a lot more money for us to use it. Ideally, we would be able to migrate their personal files from NAS to OneDrive, leave a stub behind, and migrate all that content to the cloud so they're not using that shared storage. Is that something on the roadmap, or is there a better way to handle that?
Yeah, let me make sure I'm getting it all correct. So, hey, we have a bunch of images we spin up for people to connect to do their work. Those images don't have their personal content or the content they work against. That's on some network-attached storage or somewhere else where that is, but it connects from that VDI that's spun up for them. And then, and so that's kind of your setup. And then the Office 365 aspect was you moved some amount of that content off that NAS.
Well, we want to.
But
But to do so means that we have to add a lot of storage to the VDI infrastructure.
Right, because in that case you're running sync.
Right.
And you're having to sync all those files down for each one of those.
Right.
This is a common challenge. Anyone that's doing the kind of virtual infrastructure that you want to scale up for those kinds of things runs into this thing where how do I reduce the amount of state for an image? Right, it's like a basic computer science problem, right? You want every image to be as small as possible so you can move it around quickly, you can load balance it, you can have as many as possible on a single device or single box, so on and so forth. So totally makes sense. And sync is kind of the antithesis of that. Sync is greedy. It wants all of the disk space. It wants to bring all the files down locally so it can operate against those files and do interesting things with those files. And so you're kind of between the rock and the hard place on that. So in terms of your migration, what you're doing there, I actually wouldn't start with sync in those VDIs. I think you're going to find it's difficult to get the right amount of storage. Unless it's relatively small, you're going to run into issues like, hey, every single time someone spins up that image, what happens? Well, sync's got to decide what things are missing, and not only did that image take however big it was, however much you allowed it to be, but now it's got to go and take down all the changes that have happened while it's been, quiesced. And so you run into a number of infrastructure challenges around that is just going to make your life hard. So I would not recommend doing sync in that scenario. I think that actually gets back to some of the other questions we had about, hey, I want to have this disconnected stuff that never is local on the device. How are you going to help me do that? And I think that's actually really good.
Yeah, if I could point that to the NAS file share, that would be perfect.
Right. And I think that's a good feature request. It's not something we have a great end-to-end story today. We talked a little bit about the DAV mapping, which is traditionally what people do in this scenario against Office
we had the
365.
same issues that gentleman had, too,
Yeah.
with the timing out.
So I just take that as like, yeah, you're right, it's good feedback. We should figure out how to make that scenario sing.
Okay.
That's a good one. Thank you. All right. We have one back there? Yeah.
Yeah, a customer wants to deploy OneDrive and replace their current desktop backup software. So in scope is to include the desktop, My Documents, and Favorites for OneDrive Sync. But of course, those don't live inside that folder.
Right.
You spoke to that earlier about using a GPO to remap My Documents into that scope.
Yeah.
I texted my colleague when you said that, and he's found a TechNet post that says Microsoft says don't do that until at least your new client comes out.
Right. So this is the challenge you're going to run into. We had a similar question earlier, which is, hey, I'm trying to move a client's content into the cloud. We want to be able to make it as simple as possible. All that muscle memory clicking on My Documents going to the desktop, that should be the same. And we want to be able to just use the tooling that Windows and the Microsoft ecosystem provide in order to do that. And you're going to run into the problems that we've talked about before, some of those screens I showed, and some of the stuff like the file name things. The challenges will be things like, are there more than 20,000 files across that set on that machine? Probably, right, or potentially, and that's going to cause challenges. Do any of those files have pound or percent in the name? That's going to cause challenges. Size of files, is it any of them over 2 gigabytes? So today's sync engine, you'll have some challenges in being able to do that and do that in a way that you feel great about. The new sync engine, the next generation sync engine, will give you a lot more opportunity to do that, and there'll be better capabilities for it. But that is kind of the rub on, hey, how far can you really push it right now?
So is the bottom line that things not in the OneDrive folder can't be included? So if I want it to go, it has to be in that folder?
Yeah, the design of the sync engines are generally to have that one folder. It simplifies a number of things around battery life and performance in particular, but also things like ACLing and kind of how we watch for things across different devices and volumes. And that's one of the reasons that we do that. So you can redirect folders, you can change their paths into being inside of the OneDrive namespace, and that's how you can connect into that local device. But you can't do the kind of spread across the device scenario.
Okay. And besides the file limitations, the 20,000 and the size limits and the pounds and whatever, besides those things, is there a reason why not to redirect as we see fit?
I would say that's something to pilot and find out. Okay. Those are the top level ones that people run into, and you kind of heard from the room like, hey, yep, we've all seen those things. There may be unique things that are challenges in this specific case, but there may not be, and it may be capable of doing it. So I would actually pilot that and see what you learn.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Cool. All right, we are out of time. All right, the OneDrive team is here all week. I'll be on the show floor over the next couple of days. I would love to see you all and talk to you. So if you have a question, please hold on to it, and we'll talk about it, and we'll clear out for the next group. Thank you.